Good morning, students. Today we will discuss about the energy sources of muscle contraction. In previous lecture, we discussed about Cori cycle. In Cori cycle, energy was obtained from the lactic acid. Here we will discuss the general mechanism of the sources of energy for muscle contraction. I am Dr. Ashok Kumar Siroya, Department of Zoology, SPC Government College, Ajmer. The energy from breakdown of ATP is responsible to move the myosin head. The binding of ATP to myosin head break the actin myosin bond. The ATP in the myosin head break into ADP and ADP and phosphate group by the enzyme ATPase. The active transport of calcium in sarcoplasmic reticulum is occur with the help of ATP. So we can say that the sources of energy in muscle contraction is ATP, or we can say the sole sources of energy is ATP, and this ATP is supplied by the following sources, like by the glucose, we can say by the glycolysis, the process of glycolysis, it converts in ATP by aerobic respiration and also by anaerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, it is known as oxidative phosphorylation and produce the more quantity of ATP than anaerobic respiration. In anaerobic respiration, it produces lactic acid, and aerobic respiration, mitochondria is also required, where the oxidative phosphorylation occurs. The second source, the fatty acid, which is also provide energy by oxidative phosphorylation, is ATP. ATP, it phosphorylate the creatine, forming the creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is the ultimate or the end source for the ATP in the muscle contraction. Muscle has the creatine phosphate as energy source, and it make the ATP by adding a phosphate in ADP, and then it converts creatine and get back to the bloodstream to phosphorylate again as creatine phosphate. The creatine phosphate energy is obtained by creatine phosphate swiftly. We can say the energy radially converts as ATP by the creatine phosphate present in the muscle fiber. Energy coin or the ATP is formed from ADP transferred from the stored energy of creatine phosphate. Like creatine phosphate plus ADP is creatine plus ATP. During relaxation period, creatine phosphate is formed by high energy bond of energy, like creatine plus ATP is converted in creatine phosphate plus ADP. For this energy is obtained from mitochondria where oxidative phosphorylation and beta oxidation of fatty acid occurs. During intense muscle activity or exercise, ATP is used from substrate level phosphorylation in glycolysis. Here in this line diagram, we can elaborate that creatine phosphate is the sole source for energy, where creatine phosphate convert in creatine, it transfer its phosphate to ATP and ATP convert in ATP, adenosine triphosphate. During the contraction, the enzyme which is responsible to create ATP from creatine phosphate is myosin ATPase, and during relaxation, which converts ADP, calcium plus ATPase enzyme, and the glucose which is found in bloodstream, oxygen and fatty acid. They provide energy by glycolysis and by beta oxidation. In glycolysis, there is a by the glucose there are two processes. First glycolysis and then oxidative phosphorylation. Where in oxidative phosphorylation, oxygen is required. It means this is a aerobic respiration, and if there is a lack of oxygen, the glycolysis only provide as substrate level ATP to the muscle contraction and form lactic acid as byproduct, which convert in glucose in the liver. And this cycle is known as Cori cycle, which we have discussed earlier. And fatty acid by oxidative decarboxylation, oxidative phosphorylation, it produces ATP. And protein also converts in amino acid, and amino acid by its deamination or oxidation process, it provides energy as ATP. Means the source of energy in the muscle contraction, first is glucose, second is fatty acids, and third one is proteins also. If we see the energy requirement in muscle contraction, energy is basically ATP, adenosine triphosphate, because the ATP when goes to the muscle, it converts in creatine phosphate, and creatine phosphate then convert in creatine phosphates then transfer its phosphate to the ADP and make the ATP. Means in this process, the mediator mediator of energy is here creatine phosphate. And creatine phosphate, because it provide energy swiftly, or we can say radially. So the creatine phosphate is a most important product in energy metabolism in muscle contraction. So in next lecture, we will discuss about different properties of muscle and how a muscle is contract in a different situation. Thank you very much.